Hello everybody, I'm Bitter, and welcome to the first video about diesels on my channel. Before BR's modernization plan went into effect, there had already been several attempts at diesel traction in the UK. Before BR existed at all, there had been several attempts. Today we'll talk about the pre-nationalization diesel shunters. When you think of the Big Four, you typically think of highly powerful but elegant 460 or Pacifics pulling express trains at high speeds up to 100 miles an hour. But from the early years of the Big Four, there has always been experiments to find the next big form of traction, most of which were not the most successful. Diesel shunters rarely fell into the unsuccessful category, but it would be decades before they'd be able to take over. Today, we'll talk about some of those shunters, starting with the Great Western. I'll be using footage of assorted diesels for this video, and there won't be much, if any, pictures or video of the locomotives in question, so feel free to put your phone down and just listen to this one. The first diesel shunter on the Great Western was simply numbered 1. It was an absolutely tiny 040 diesel mechanical, with a 70 horsepower engine and a top speed of about 15 miles an hour, with a wheelbase of just 4.5 feet long. Built in 1933 by John Fowler and Company for work at Swindon Works, it would only hold that position for 7 years. In 1940, it was sold to the Ministry of Supply and seems to have been scrapped shortly after. Their next trip into diesel traction would be much more successful. In 1935, the Great Western approached Hawthorne Leslie, and in 1936, a complete diesel-electric locomotive was delivered to Swindon Works. This shunter came with an engine and traction motors from English Electric, the engine being the same used in the later British Rail 08s, nearly 30 years later. Originally numbered 2, it was renumbered 15100 in March 1948, and classified D3/10, later 3/11A. After testing, the engine started to be bounced around a little bit, landing in War Department service at Swansea for a short time and returning to Old Oak Common in November of 1947. Under BR, it was moved to Bristol's St. Philip's Marsh Depot. In 1950, it was sent to the Derby Works for repair, and returned to Old Oak Common from there. It was moved a couple more times before settling in at Swindon in 1960, and staying there until its withdrawal in 1965. It would be sold for scrap the same year. This engine had much of the makings and appearance of the later British Rail 08 class, and a look very close to Maunsell's shunters on the Southern Railway. It seems to have worked just as well. It had a 19-mile-an-hour top speed and a tractive effort just over 30,000 pounds. British Rail number 15107 was commissioned by the Great Western Railway, but only delivered after nationalization. It would be another 6-coupled diesel-electric shunter, following the relative success of 15100. Working from 1949 to 1957, the locomotive was stored for just a year until withdrawal in 1958. The locomotive had a 4-cylinder, 360 horsepower engine supplied by Petters Limited, who specialized in stationary engines, and the traction motors were supplied by Brush Traction. Its top speed was 20 miles an hour, and it had a tractive effort 5,000 pounds higher than the Great Western's last shunter. I can only assume, however, that it wasn't as good as the last attempt, or at the very least it was so non-standard that it wasn't worth keeping around. The previous engine worked for 30 years, 7 of those being after the withdrawal and scrapping of 107. Another class of 6 diesel-electric shunters were purchased by the Great Western, but they were delivered to British Rail. They were fairly similar to the previous 15100, but with more tractive effort. They were classified D3/11 by BR, and they were all withdrawn in 1967, with working lives of just 19 years. This is likely due to them being totally non-standard. I found very little information on them, and that's all we got for diesel shunters on the Great Western. In the next installment of this little series, I suppose, we'll touch on the LMS. The reason that this is so short and there's so little here is because, well, I mean, there's not a whole lot of information on those locomotives, but also I wanted to do this all in one go. Get all of the Big Four's diesel shunters out of the way in one video. But with the holidays happening and an incident in which I spilled coffee over my entire office, I just don't have the time. The footage for the rest of the parts of this series are probably going to be about the same, because only for the LMS do I have a model, and it's only for one of the LMS's locomotives, and they had a good few diesel shunters. So I'll see y'all next week. I might cover a steam engine next week. I'll see y'all there.